The ID card didn't just fall. It clattered across the polished marble floor with a sharp snap that made people in the bank lobby turn their heads. For a split second, there was silence, the kind of heavy silence where even the hum of the air. Conditioning seemed to fade before a few scattered gasps broke through. A mother stood there, perfectly composed in her cream blazer and pearl earrings, her heels planted firmly as if she had expected the insult. Her hand hesitated just for a moment before she bent to pick up the card. She didn't tremble with weakness, but with the sting of humiliation, a sting she knew far too well. One she had long ago learned to cover with grace. The young teller sat smugly behind his desk, arms folded, his lips curling with a satisfaction that only arrogance could fuel. He leaned back in his chair, loudly announcing to no one in particular, "Next time, bring proper identification." He eyed her carefully, his gaze lingering not on the golden letters of her ID, but on the tone of her skin, on the calm elegance she carried that he interpreted as a disguise. Angela Howard straightened, her daughter's small hand tightening around hers. The teenager whispered urgently, "Mom, let's just go. Please." But Angela's eyes never left the teller. She took a measured breath, as though she were calming herself before stepping into a boardroom filled with adversaries ready to test her. Her voice was steady, not sharp, but it carried weight. "Young man," she said with an evenness that cut through the room, "you just made a mistake your bank cannot afford." The teller scoffed. "Mistake?" He picked up his pen, spinning it between his fingers with practiced arrogance. "I see fake IDs all the time. Doesn't matter what you're wearing or pretending to be." His words dripped with disdain, his smirk widening at the discomfort spreading through the line of waiting customers. Some shifted uneasily, some looked away, and one older woman in the back whispered to her companion, "That's not right." Angela didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply placed the ID back on the counter and tapped it once with her finger. The name shone in bold gold letters. Dr. Angela Howard, Chief Executive Officer, Howard and Kensington Global Industries. It was an ID that could open any boardroom door in the world, that could command the attention of presidents, prime ministers, and billionaire investors. Yet here in the confines of this modest branch bank, it was tossed to the floor like garbage. The teller barely glanced at the name before shrugging. "Means nothing to me? You want me to take you seriously? Get something official, not some made-up plastic card." Angela's daughter gasped, tugging on her sleeve. "Mom, let's just leave." Her voice cracked with a mixture of fear and embarrassment, cheeks burning under the stares of strangers. But Angela squeezed her daughter's hand gently, reassuringly, without looking away from the teller. "I've faced worse than you," Angela said calmly. Her tone wasn't angry, wasn't desperate. It was chillingly certain. The tone of someone who had built an empire from nothing and endured every manner of dismissal along the way. Around them, the bank lobby had grown completely silent. Even the security guard near the entrance shifted awkwardly, his eyes darting between the teller and Angela, unsure of whether to intervene. A mother and child stood at the heart of a storm that no one could see coming until it would be too late. Angela reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. It didn't fumble, didn't hesitate. She scrolled once, pressed a button, and lifted it to her ear. "Connect me to Mr. Davis," she said softly. The teller snorted under his breath, muttering, "Oh, sure, call whoever you want." But within seconds, a booming voice came through the phone speaker. "Angela, tell me the good news. Did we get everything finalized at the board meeting?" The lobby froze again, and the customers exchanged looks. Even the teller's smirk wavered, though he quickly tried to cover it by shuffling some papers on his desk. Angela's lips curved faintly, though her eyes remained hard. "Yes, John. Contract signed. Terms agreed. But we need to discuss something immediately at your bank." The teller's pen stilled in his hand. His eyes darted to the ID on the counter again, then back to Angela's calm expression. He swallowed, suddenly unsure, but said nothing. Angela ended the call and slipped the phone back into her purse, her motions elegant, deliberate. Then she turned to her daughter with a smile that softened her features. "Patience," she whispered. Sometimes the best lessons are taught without raising your voice. Her daughter, still confused, nodded slowly, glancing back at the teller, whose smugness had started to crumble. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his expression. The other customers in line could sense something bigger than themselves was unfolding. The air felt electric, heavy, as if the building itself was holding its breath. They didn't know who Angela was, not yet, but the way she stood, poised and calm after such blatant disrespect, told them enough. She wasn't just anybody. She was somebody powerful, someone who didn't need to shout to command attention. The teller shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. "Look, maybe I overreacted. Let's just move on, all right?" Angela's eyes flicked to him, cool and unwavering. "No," she said simply. "We don't move on from this. Not today." But her daughter watched in awe. She had seen her mother negotiate billion-dollar deals, had seen her walk into boardrooms full of men who doubted her and leave with their contracts signed. But this was different. This wasn't about profit margins or global markets. This was about respect, about the simple dignity of being seen as who she truly was. In that moment, Angela didn't need to argue. She didn't need to prove herself to the teller. His mistake was already sealed. What he didn't know was that the phone call she had just made had set in motion a chain of events far beyond his comprehension. The doors to the bank would not just open to ordinary customers the next time they would open to power, to scrutiny, to the kind of reckoning that could collapse entire institutions. And as Angela turned to leave her daughter's hand safely in hers, she spoke one last time, her voice carrying across the lobby for everyone to hear. Respect costs nothing, but losing it can cost you everything. Every eye followed her as she walked away, her heels clicking like a gavel striking judgment. None of them, not the teller, not the guard, not the quiet customers standing frozen in line, realized that they had just witnessed the moment a billion-dollar partnership died. Because when you throw away respect, you throw away everything. Elspeth Angela didn't sleep that night, not because she was angry. Anger was fleeting, something she had long ago trained herself to harness, to cool, to convert into precision and strategy. She didn't sleep because her mind moved like a machine, spinning gears that clanked against one another with one thought: how easily her dignity had been dismissed. Her daughter had seen it, the humiliation of having her ID thrown like trash. But Angela wasn't humiliated, not anymore. She was resolved. What hurt her more than the insult was her daughter's eyes, wide with confusion and shame, questioning why people could treat her mother that way when she knew her mother was one of the most powerful women in the country. By morning, her resolve was diamond. She stood before her full-length mirror, adjusting the cuff of her tailored navy suit. Her pearl earrings caught the light, her hair perfectly smoothed back. Not for Deuce, she didn't dress like this for them, not for the bank, not for the teller who thought tossing her ID was some act of dominance. She dressed like this for herself because her presence was her weapon. And she knew the battlefield she was about to step into would require more than quiet composure. It would require strategy. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. A message from John Davis, CEO of the multinational bank she had partnered with only weeks ago, lit up the screen. Angela, looking forward to today's press conference. The world's going to see the biggest partnership in years. Angela stared at the words for a moment, then typed back, "We'll talk before the conference." In private, she left the house with her daughter still half asleep upstairs, her nanny already preparing breakfast. The ride downtown was quiet, the city still waking as the sun glinted against glass towers. Angela sat in the back of her car, hands folded neatly in her lap, but her thoughts were sharp and loud. That teller wasn't just rude, he was a symptom of a deeper sickness in institutions that believed power flowed only one way. That respect could be rationed out like currency, given to some and denied to others. She had seen it her entire life, but what struck her most was how unashamed he had been about it. He hadn't cared who she was. He hadn't even bothered to look. The car pulled up in front of the bank headquarters. Its massive columns loomed like a fortress, glass doors glistening. Reporters were already gathering, cameras waiting for the announcement of the multi-billion-dollar partnership between Angela's firm and the bank. The deal was meant to change everything. expand access to financial systems in underdeveloped nations, create opportunities for minority-owned businesses, launch innovations that would reshape the global economy. But Angela wasn't thinking about headlines. She was thinking about yesterday's teller, the sound of her ID hitting the marble. The muttered lady, "I see fakes all the time." That arrogance didn't belong to just one man. It belonged to the culture of the place whose logo shined. Above her now, inside, executives swarmed the lobby, greeting her with polished smiles and firm handshakes. John Davis himself approached, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier, his energy confident and warm. "Angela," he boomed, clasping both her hands, "you look radiant. Today's going to be historic." She smiled politely. "John, we need to talk." His brow furrowed for just a moment, but he nodded and led her toward a private conference room upstairs. Once inside, he closed the door, gesturing for her to sit. "What's on your mind, Cold Feet? Don't tell me you're backing out now. We're hours away from making history." Angela sat, her back perfectly straight, and folded her hands on the table. "John, something happened yesterday at one of your branches. Something I can't ignore." His confident expression softened into mild confusion. "One of my branches?" "Angela, with respect, we oversee thousands of branches. Issues come up. If it's a customer service complaint, we can deal with it after today." She shook her head slowly. "It wasn't customer service. It was an insult. A violation." John frowned. "Go on." Angela met his gaze directly, her voice calm but unyielding. "Went into a branch yesterday with my daughter. Presented my identification as required. The teller looked at it, looked at me, and threw it onto the floor. Called it fake. Me. In front of my child. In front of your customers." The room went still. John blinked, leaning back in his chair. "He threw your ID?" "Yes," she said, because he couldn't imagine that someone who looks like me could be who I am. John rubbed his temple, letting out a long breath. "Angela, that's unacceptable. I'll make sure the branch manager fires him. We'll issue an apology. Personal one, if you'd like." Angela tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing just enough to sharpen the air between them. "Think this is about one teller?" John hesitated, caught off guard by her tone. "Well, isn't it?" "A bad apple, no?" Angela interrupted softly but firmly. "It's about the tree, John, the roots. It's a culture that allows someone to sit behind your desk with your logo on his chest and believe he can treat people like that without consequence. If he felt bold enough to throw my ID, imagine what he does to the single mother cashing her paycheck or the immigrant opening his first account." He didn't hesitate because he believed this place would back him. That is the problem. John leaned forward, his voice lowering. "Angela, listen. I understand your frustration, but we can't throw away this partnership over one ignorant employee. This deal means nothing if I stand beside you today and smile while your branches treat people like trash." Her words cut like glass. John stared at her, silent. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that. Not in his own bank, not by anyone. But Angela didn't flinch. She sat there, regal and calm, her presence commanding the room more than his title ever could. Finally, he said, "What do you want?" Angela stood, smoothing her blazer. "I don't want anything. I came here to let you know I won't stand. On that stage today, I won't lend my name, my company, or my billions to an institution that disrespects the very people we claim we're trying to empower." John's jaw dropped slightly. "Angela, be reasonable. Do you know what walking away now would mean? We've announced this deal. The media is waiting downstairs. Our stockholders will ask why the deal fell apart." Angela finished for him. She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "And you'll have to tell them the truth, John, that you lost a $2.5 billion partnership because you couldn't control the culture inside your own walls." For the first time in his career, John Davis was speechless. He had negotiated with kings, presidents, even cutthroat rivals. But he had never been dismantled so quietly, so absolutely. Angela opened the door. But before stepping out, she added one last sentence. "Respect costs you nothing. But today, it just costs you everything." Downstairs, the reporters buzzed with anticipation, cameras flashing as executives shuffled nervously. Angela walked out the front doors, her head high, ignoring the questions shouted after her. She slid into her car, the driver closing the door behind her. And the cameras caught only the image of a powerful black woman leaving a billion-dollar deal behind without a second glance. In the back seat, she finally let out a breath. Her phone vibrated again. This time it was her daughter, texting from home. "How did it go?" Angela smiled faintly, typing back, "Better than you think. You'll understand one day." The car pulled away from the bank, leaving chaos behind. Executives scrambled, shareholders panicked, and John Davis stood alone in a silent conference room, staring at the empty chair where Angela had sat. The largest deal of his career had evaporated in less than 10 minutes, not because of market shifts, not because of legal barriers, but because one teller thought respect was optional. And as the news broke hours later that Angela Howard had pulled out of the $2.5 billion partnership, the world didn't see it as a failure. They saw it as a statement, a message, a warning, that no matter how powerful the bank thought it was, it could not survive on arrogance alone. Angela's quiet dignity had spoken louder than any press conference ever could. The silence inside the bank's boardroom after Angela's departure was deafening. The executives who had been preparing their smiles for the cameras just moments earlier now shuffled papers, avoiding each other's eyes. John Davis, usually the immovable center of authority, stood frozen at the head of the long mahogany table, his hands gripping the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles whitened. The confidence that had carried him through decades of leadership was gone, replaced by something he had not felt in years: fear. Fear of collapse, fear of exposure, fear that his empire had just cracked from within. Across the city, however, Angela sat calmly in her office, the morning sunlight streaming through the glass wall behind her. She had been expecting phone calls, angry ones, desperate ones, some full of apology, others full of threats. But instead of pacing the room or second-guessing her decision, she poured herself tea, opened her laptop, and began working. Because she understood something the men in those skyscrapers didn't. Her silence was louder than their explanations. The first call came within the hour. John himself. She didn't answer. The second was the bank's public relations head, offering to arrange a private apology, press statement, a full investigation. She ignored that too. Gosh. By midday, her inbox overflowed with messages from journalists, investors, even politicians. Curious about why she had walked away from what was being hailed as the deal of the decade, and yet she said nothing. Silence became her armor, her weapon. The world filled in the blanks for her. Headlines exploded across news sites. $2.5 billion deal crumbles in mystery exit. Angela Howard walks away, but why? Social media speculated wildly, with some praising her for not being controlled by corporate greed, while others accused her of arrogance. Still, she didn't respond. She waited. Inside the bank's tower, panic escalated. Stock prices began to dip as rumors spread. The executives demanded answers from John. He could not bring himself to tell them the truth, that one of his tellers had humiliated Angela, reducing her to nothing more than a fake ID and a discarded card on the floor. The truth was too embarrassing, too damning, too small, and yet too massive to contain. It wasn't the kind of scandal they could bury, because if it got out, the narrative would be impossible to control. That a $2.5 billion partnership was destroyed by racism in its rawest, ugliest form. Angela, meanwhile, met with her team behind closed doors. They were young, hungry, and brilliant minds who looked up to her not only as a leader, but as a symbol of what was possible. When she told them what had happened, they didn't gasp, they nodded, some with clenched jaws, others with sad familiarity. They had all seen it, lived it, felt it. And so when Angela said, "We're redirecting our partnership," there was no hesitation. She had already anticipated this move in 24 hours. She was on a video call with the CEO of a European financial group that had been begging for her collaboration for years. They didn't just want her name, they wanted her vision. They agreed immediately, with terms even better than the American bank had offered. By the end of the week, the same deal that John Davis had thought he owned was signed, sealed, and redirected overseas. The fallout was brutal. The American bank's shareholders revolted, lawsuits loomed, competitors smelled blood in the water. Analysts appeared on television questioning how the leadership had let such a monumental deal slip away, and still, Angela said nothing. She didn't need to. Then the moment came when silence broke not from her, but from someone inside the bank. A whistleblower leaked the truth. An anonymous letter reached the press, describing exactly what had happened in that branch, detailing the teller's behavior and Angela's confrontation with John Davis in the conference room. Within hours, the internet ignited. Clips of commentators echoed across every platform. She walked away because of racism. Her ID was thrown on the floor in front of her child. A $2.5 billion deal collapsed because of one act of disrespect. The public outrage was instant. Customers began withdrawing accounts from the bank. Protesters gathered outside branches, holding signs that read, "Respect is worth more than money, and we believe Angela." The teller who had caused it all was swiftly fired, but that wasn't enough. People wanted accountability higher up. They wanted change. For Angela, it wasn't about vengeance. It was about clarity. She watched the chaos unfold, not with joy, but with resolve. She hadn't wanted to destroy the bank. She had wanted to remind them of their humanity. But if destruction was the only thing that would force them to listen, then destruction would do. John Davis finally reached her one evening, his voice ragged over the phone. "Angela, please, meet me. We can fix this. I can issue a public apology. Myself. Name whatever terms you want. Just, please." Angela sat in her study, her daughter's laughter drifting down the hall as she played with the nanny. Angela listened to John's desperation and closed her eyes. "John," she said softly, "this was never about money. It was about respect. You didn't lose me because of one teller. You lost me because when I told you the truth, you minimized. Yet you thought a public apology and a firing would patch the wound. But you didn't see the rot underneath. That's why this happened." He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was broken. "So that's it?" "That's it," Angela said, and ended the call. Weeks later, she stood on a stage in Geneva, the flags of multiple nations behind her, announcing her new partnership with the European Financial Group. The cameras flashed, the applause roared, and the world celebrated the dawn of a new financial future. Her daughter sat in the front row, watching her mother speak with pride, understanding now why they had walked away from that other bank. Meanwhile, back in New York, John Davis was forced to resign under pressure from the board. His name, once synonymous with power, now dragged through the mud in headlines that called him negligent, tone-deaf, out of touch. The bank's reputation never recovered fully. Angela, however, soared higher. Her company doubled in valuation within the year. Her initiatives brought banking access to communities long ignored, creating opportunities where there had been none. And every time someone asked her about the deal she had walked away from, she simply smiled and said, "Sometimes silence says everything." The teller who had thrown her ID faded into obscurity, but his action remained immortalized in history, not as a personal slight, but as the spark that ignited a reckoning in the financial world. Angela didn't set out to be a martyr or a hero. She set out to be respected. In the end, her dignity not only changed her path, but reshaped an entire industry. And so, as her daughter curled against her on a quiet Sunday evening asking, "Mom, did walking away really change things?" Angela kissed her forehead and whispered, "Yes, baby," because the world saw that respect is worth more than billions. That was the truth. That was the legacy. The story ended not with the bank's collapse, but with a reminder etched into every headline, every conference stage, and every whisper in boardrooms around the world. You can recover from losing money, but you can never recover from losing respect. And that silence, that simple walk out of the glass tower, became louder than any speech Angela Howard could have ever given. The end.